The following is dedicated to those who fought and those who died on the beaches from hell. Dieppe.
Probably the most vivid, lasting memory that I have.
You could smell fear around you. You know, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as a smell of fear, but there is.
I picked up a lot of shrapnel at that time. Picked up more later on, and I picked up 4 bullets later on. So I ended up actually with the pieces they took out. It was 52 pieces that they took out, plus the 4 bullets.
The year was 1942.
Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me.
It was the spring of 1942, and the war situation was not looking good for the Allies. The Germans had penetrated deep into Russia, the British Army in North Africa was losing ground, and the Germans had occupied France. The only thing between Britain and the enemy was the English Channel.
We're coming in on a wing and a prayer.
We were still 2 years away from the full-scale invasion of Western Europe. A raid was planned on the French coastal port of Dieppe in July. The Allies had 2 purposes in mind. One of the goals was to make the Germans feel vulnerable for a coastal invasion and convince them to reinforce their troops along the English Channel at the expense of other fronts. The second objective was to test new techniques and equipment for the eventual D-Day invasion. But the weather was not favorable, and the Dieppe raid was called off, perhaps a warning of things to come. Later in the summer, the operation was revived under the code name Jubilee.
Night and day, you are the one.
Early in the morning of August 19, 1942, 6,000 troops, about 5,000 of them Canadians, left the shores of England for France. As they approached their goal, another problem arose. The assault force encountered a small German convoy, resulting in a fierce sea battle. Success for this raid on Dieppe had depended on surprise and darkness. The sea battle took away the surprise factor. The delay in landing took away the element of darkness. For 9 hours, the Allied troops, supported by naval fire and air attacks, battled the Germans. But it was a battle that would be costly. The raid was not without its successes, but the casualty toll was staggering. 900 Canadians died, close to 2,000 became prisoners of war. Of the 5,000 who left England that morning, only 2,200 returned that day. In the middle of August this past summer, the Department of Veterans Affairs took 36 men and women who fought on the Dieppe beaches on a pilgrimage back to those shores. Veterans Affairs Minister Jerry Merrithew spoke in southern England at what would be the first of many memorial services.
And these are sure to be poignant events for our Dieppe veterans and the many relatives and friends who will be visiting the graves of those who were taken from them on August 19th, 1942. Well, here at Brookwood is the first evidence of a raid that began in nervous anticipation and ended in tragic reality. On this memorial alone are the names of nearly 2,000 Canadians killed in that disastrous day and who have no known graves. Also here are the graves of 42 others who did manage to escape from the bloodied beaches of Dieppe, only to die later as a result of their wounds. And yet, while we'll have many to mourn in this pilgrimage, we will also have reason to celebrate. Dieppe upheld the precious reputation won by the Canadian Corps in the First World War. The bravery of the men on the beaches was to inspire new recruits, and revenge was in the kit bags of those who returned for the real thing in Sicily, Italy, and on D-Day and beyond. Dieppe showed that we could be beaten by the odds. Canadians could not be broken, either in battle or in prisoner of war camp. And this is why, 50 years later, Canadians will be able to cross the channel to Dieppe with chests out and heads held high.
John Patrick Grogan of Renfrew was one of the youngest Canadians to fight on that day in 1942. He had lied about his age in order to join the Army a couple of years earlier. He was 19 when the troops went ashore.
I didn't get off the beach, but I got ashore, and we moved up around on the beach, and the big thing was to try to keep out of the way of the horrible fire that was going on. There was very little places that you had any cover at all. Up by the seawall there was some cover, and I found a cave in the side of the cliff, and I spent some time in there, and from there to go out once in a while, and I found a Bren gun that had been lying around. There was lots of weapons all around, and there was a house up to the right of the cliff that I took a few shots at. There was fire coming from there, but the fire coming from there was just too bad. I went back into the cave. That seemed to be a fairly safe place. I believe it saved my life. The Germans got wise to us there too, and began to, when they couldn't hit us with rifle or machine gun fire or the mortar fire, the artillery and mortar fire that landed on the stones would fly around too. Even in the protection of that cave, you weren't safe from the stones. But then they began to throw and drop hand grenades down too. Our chances were just no good. We just didn't have a chance, and with so many that had been killed up to then, someone down the beach, I noticed someone was waving a white towel, and this became the end of it, you know, for me. Not entirely the end, because the noise and the firing, stuff like that, didn't stop, because the Air Force had come in, you see, and they were blasting around. Then there was the guns out in on the ships in the channel too, the destroyers there. They were blasting. So many people were wounded and killed even after the surrender.
During the pilgrimage, the vets shared their private thoughts and their memories. Memories that for many will never be forgotten. Like Mac McGregor of Ottawa, who piloted one of the landing craft on that tragic day. He will never forget the feeling when he had to leave men stranded on the beach, some of them dying when the order came to withdraw.
We managed to get our troops in, but there was just no way we could go back and pick them up. We tried a couple of times, but we just about got blown out of the water. It's probably the most vivid, lasting memory that I have, and of course regret that we couldn't get back in. Mind you, I don't think there were too many that would have been able to clamber aboard the craft. They just seemed to be bodies all over lying on the beach.
It was an emotion-filled trip for the veterans. For some, their first time back on the beaches since that horrible day 50 years earlier. Watery eyes and tears on their cheeks were not uncommon when the ferry entered the port of Dieppe after the crossing from New Haven in England, the same route they took in 1942. But as McGregor pointed out, it was different this time.
Yes, I think I felt some emotions running pretty high when I saw the cliffs. Realized that everything looked so pretty, so attractive now, and it didn't look very attractive back in 1942.
As the ferry entered the harbor, they were met by a large Canadian flag and a Canadian Forces band playing The Maple Leaf Forever. And those watery eyes and tears on the cheeks were not limited to only the vets. John Grogan remembered the view and remembered his thoughts during the intensive battle as he wondered if he would get out alive.
Yes. Yes. All the time there. You could smell fear around you. You know, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as a smell of fear, but there is. The fear because of the so many bodies and so many people in different, somebody packing their, they're trying to pack their guts back in, and arms blown off and heads blown and this kind of thing, you know, a terrible fear to see that. And particularly the age had a lot to do with it too, you know. And we were very well trained in, I've heard people say that we were inexperienced, and that we were inexperienced. It was our first under fire, but we were very well trained. And we had good officers and good NCOs too. Very well. We were trained to, but the shock, the trauma of this was just, I don't care how well a person would have been trained, the trauma was terrific, you know.
But the soldiers aren't the only ones who remember. So do the people of Dieppe. Even those who weren't born know of the battle as generations pass down the stories, the appreciation, and the love for Canadians. A love that will never end. During the celebrations in Dieppe, there were more Canadian flags than French flags. Wherever our vets went, they were honored. When they marched, thousands of French people cheered and applauded and reached out to just touch the aging soldiers and sailors and airmen. They are still heroes. The president of Canada's Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Association, Bob Castles, says the reception was outstanding.
Yes, it's been very good. The French people are very outgoing to the veterans that we have with us, the fellows that were here 50 years ago, and their response to them is very good, and the veterans are feeling at home here with the people.
It's on the verge of embarrassment. The people in Dieppe do more to honor our Canadian troops than Canada does. And Castle says it's appreciated.
I think over here they appreciate more what happened back 50 years ago when these fellows were here, because they came in and they were being oppressed, and these fellows saved them. They took them out of it, and they gave them their freedom back, the freedom that we have in Canada, but we don't know what these fellows paid, so that we keep it until you get over here and see all the monuments in their honor and the cemeteries and the numbers that were left behind in each cemetery.
Birds over the white cliffs of Dover tomorrow.
And the veterans tell you stories you find hard to believe. But their stories never change. Their comrades confirm those stories, and you can tell by their eyes that those stories are true. Stories by people like Bob Large of Lion's Head, the past president of the Prisoner of War Association.
And I guess it would be about the third or the fourth burst after we started firing that gun. The mortar bomb come down right on the barrel of the gun and blew it all to the devil. And I picked up a lot of shrapnel at that time. I picked up more later on, and I picked up 4 bullets later on. So I ended up actually with the pieces they took out. There was 52 pieces that they took out, plus the 4 bullets. They carried me down to the beach before the battle was over, because I was wounded, and they were going to try and get me onto the boats going back. I got halfway down, and the fellows that were carrying me across the guns, they had 2 guns slung underneath me, carrying me down the beach. And one fellow says, "Drop him anyhow, drop him, he's dead anyhow." So they dropped me right there in the middle of the beach. And that's when I started to get some of the bullets. So I figured this wasn't too good an idea, so I crawled over to a tank. And right at the edge of the tank, and then I started to strip my clothes off and figured, well, I'll try and get out in the water myself. And I did. I took off everything but my shirt, and I swam out. I got a hold of an ALC, and they transferred me to a hospital ship. The hospital ship was on its way back to England, and we got 7 miles out, and a Stuka come over and dropped the bomb right down the spout of the hospital ship. And 2 of us reached shore alive out of the whole lot, and we were the 2 that had been laid up on the deck because there was no room down below. And we were laid out on the deck, and we got blown by the explosion into the water, and we were the only ones that reached shore alive out of the 2. So we swam 7 miles back into shore. And we shot up in both legs and 1 arm and the head when I made the swim. And it picked me up the next day. And then they transferred us up to a first aid post, and they took us to the hospital.
Yeah, these are the Germans.
Yeah. And they started to operate on me to take some of the shrapnel out. They had no anesthetic, and I passed out after the 3rd cut. And then when I come to, they had my legs in splints.
Large was a determined man, determined to find his freedom from prison camps. But he was captured. And he escaped again. And he was captured. And he escaped again. By the time the war ended, Large had escaped 5 times and was recaptured 5 times.
Tried 5 breaks altogether. One break that I was on, I got out, and when I got about 2 miles away from the the work party that it was on, I remembered that I'd forgotten my mustard and my pepper. So I went back and I climbed back over the fence again into the compound, got my mustard and pepper, and back out again. And as it was a lucky thing I did, because they sicked the dogs on us that time. There were two of us. And they sicked the dogs on us, and I had the pepper and the mustard there to sprinkle down their tracks. So as soon as the dogs hit that, they were done. They couldn't track us anymore. And if I hadn't have gone back after it, they might have ripped us to pieces, you see. But that was one. It didn't get too far that way. I think it was 3 days was all I was out that day, and finally caught me. Unless you contacted the underground, you didn't have much chance of getting out anywhere at all. But the one that I remember the most was the last one. And I'd ridden the train for 3 days in a Polish clothing, a big P on my jacket. And people said, well, where'd you get the clothing? Well, you picked it up a little here and a little there. You had cigarettes that come in from Canada, or a chocolate bar. And you'd offer a Pole something for a piece of clothing, and you put it on underneath your uniform, and then you go back into camp and you'd hide it until you had enough clothing to clothe yourself. Well, I made the break and I got away. I got onto the train. I had papers. And I was on the train, sitting on the train, and one of the stations, this old lady and her, looked like her grandson, climbed down and sat down into the seat opposite me. So he asked me first in German, what time was it? I didn't pay any attention, just kept the paper up in front of my face. A little while later, he asked me in Polish, and I still didn't do a thing. I just sat there. About 15 minutes after that, right out of the blue, he says, what time is it, please? And I automatically looked at the big Polish watch I had on my arm. Well, they got off at the next station, and the one after that was 3 kilos from the Swiss border, and that's where they nailed me. Come off, and the Gestapo got me. They worked me over, of course, when they first picked me up with the rubber hoses, and they're a master. The Gestapo are a master with those rubber hoses. They can beat you until you pass out and never leave a mark on you.
At the major ceremony, August 19th, at the Canadian War Cemetery in Dieppe, Veterans Affairs Minister Jerry Merrithew noted that Dieppe has its own place in the war history.
All we have to do is look at these rows of graves and realize that not a corner of Canada was spared. Dieppe touched us all and still does. This is a time to bless the memories of those who were killed landing on these shores 50 years ago. This is the occasion to pay tribute to the unquenchable spirit of those who refuse to be broken by the indignities of prisoner of war life.
They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age will not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
But despite all of this combined effort, August 19th, 1942 was our costliest day of the war. Some 5,000 men of the Canadian 2nd Division left for Normandy, and only 2,200 returned to England. We had 900 fatal casualties. Nearly 2,000 more were known to know manacles, chains, death marches, and loss of liberty for almost 3 years of their lives.
Private H.F. McCourt, the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, 19th August, 1942.
Gunner K. MacDonald Stewart, Royal Canadian Artillery, 19th August 1942, age 19.
Private M. Roy, le fusilier Mont-Royal, le 19 août 1942.
Corporal A.J. Vinnie, Cameron Highlanders of Canada, 19th August 1942.
Private P.J. Kelly, the Royal Regiment of Canada, 19th August 1942, age 37.
A soldier of the Second World War, a Canadian regiment, 19th August 1942, known unto God.
A sailor of the 1939 to 1945 war, 19th August 1942.
This is why 50 years later, French men and women who weren't even born in 1942 will greet our veterans as heroes and liberators. And this is why I'm certain that long into the future, Canadians will still be visiting Dieppe and coming away with an increased pride in their own country. Today, comrades, we salute their spirit, their courage, and their sacrifices on August 19th, 1942.
They were upset with any Canadian because the Canadians were well known for going over the wire, as they called it. Any chance we got, we would do either sabotage or go over the wire and escape and try to get back.
And enjoy every minute of it.
Yes. If we could have made contact with the underground, there'd been a lot more of us get back, though. But we just couldn't make the contacts.
The pilgrimage ended August 20th when the veterans returned to the Canadian War Cemetery after the crowds had gone. They spent time looking for graves of friends. They spent time honoring those they didn't know. They spent time alone with their memories, their private thoughts, and their prayers.
Dream of peace lives on, and the dream of peace lives on.
All the pictures and all the descriptions cannot truly portray the impossible task these men faced 50 years ago. The cliffs that tower over the beaches gave the Germans command of the battle. We think of running in the sand on beaches. In Dieppe, there is no sand. The beaches are nothing but stones, stones the size of your fist and bigger. You walk on those stones and you find it difficult. And you can't imagine trying to run on them. Run on them while you carry extra equipment and fight heavy enemy fire and battle the barbed wire entangled along the beach. And the stones you try to run on become weapons against you. Exploding mortar shells and grenades on the beaches turn those rocks into hundreds of pieces of shrapnel. You have to see those massive white cliffs. You have to walk on the rocks on the beach. You have to talk to those who fought for their lives and ours on August 19th, 1942 to really have any idea of the hell they experienced. And if you do that, your voice breaks and your eyes fill up. And you know why, even today, these men still cry. They fought and many died on the beaches from hell.